following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Rieger getting traded to Minnesota changes nothing.
6'4" guys running 4.4s. These guys don't grow on trees. And a lot of times I'm willing to bet on, especially long term, on the freak athlete.
You don't ever want to overreact to what guys look like in preseason. There's been a ton of preseason all-stars that never make rosters or never pan out. Good morning, Belly Up Fantasy Live. How's everybody doing on this fine Sunday morning? I am Chase Thornton, coming to you as always from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar. Flying solo again this morning, Kevin Wilson's wife. It's her birthday apparently this weekend, so we would like to wish you a very happy birthday to Mrs. Kevin. And he is understandably given the day off today, but lots to get to today. Last week we covered a lot of quarterback talk in the league. We talked about how almost half the league had questions at the quarterback position. Kind of cool. Almost immediately as soon as we went off the air last week, we had movement on several fronts that way. So we'll get to some of that. We'll talk about some of the franchise tag decisions that were made this week around the league, at several different positions. And of course, we'll look ahead to some free agency that coming up this week. The legal tampering period obviously starts tomorrow ahead of the start of the new league year on Wednesday. So we should see a lot of movement in terms of, NFL rosters and roster decisions. We may or may not hear from Aaron Rodgers and what his decision is this week. Should be all kinds of fun coming up here. And then as soon as that gets rolling, then we can really start to look ahead to see what do we think teams are going to do with the draft. Speaking of the draft, we did have a big trade this week, the earliest ever trade of the overall number one pick. So lots to get to today. I hope everybody's doing great out there. I know as soon as I get off the air here, I'm going to be heading outside up here in Wisconsin. We've been dealing with some snow lately. I've just watched the snowplow go by twice in my early morning prep here for the show. So I'll be out there making sure that we can get out and get in it. But as we said, a lot of movement this week, especially on the quarterback front. It was kind of funny as soon as, like I said, almost as soon as we went off the air, within the next day, there were immediately, basically four guys that came right off the board. We got word from a few other teams that they were or were not interested in certain guys. First off, I guess, one of the big dominoes that fell for this entire offseason here, Derek Carr finally makes his decision. He signs with the New Orleans Saints. 4 years, $150 million, overall. When you look at the way that the contract's structured, it really turns out to be more of, maybe functionally anyway, it turns out to be more like a 2-year deal with kind of a 3rd-year option. Okay. Basically the first half of things is guaranteed for him. That 4th year on there kind of helps for, salary cap and distribution purposes, and that it brought Derek Carr's average annual value where he wanted it though. And it gives the Saints an upgrade over, I assume an upgrade over what they had last season in Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston. It gives Derek Carr some stability here for the next 2 years. There are some interesting, fun young pieces there. Chris Olave. They just signed Juwan Johnson to a bit of an extension there at tight end. Obviously, they still have Taysom Hill, their jackknife, Swiss Army knife kind of toy that they use down there. They're discussing Michael Thomas, whether they want to extend him, whether they want to rework. They've already reworked his deal once earlier this offseason. If they rework it again, or if they extend him, how will that shake out? Michael Thomas, obviously we haven't seen much from Michael Thomas since he had that phenomenal 2019. He's only played in a handful of games. He's got less than full season's worth of work here in the last 3 years. Is Michael Thomas even Michael Thomas anymore? I don't know. He looked okay in the 3 games that we saw from him, a year ago. Looked okay. Certainly wasn't the defensive back nightmare, can't guard Mike that we had come to know and trust in fantasy. But there are some weapons. There are options down there for Derek Carr. Of course, the Alvin Kamara legal situation kind of hangs over as a cloud over that team until that gets resolved. But Derek Carr signs with New Orleans, 4 years, $150 million. From a fantasy standpoint, Derek Carr has always been sort of an okay option, but he's always been more of a fallback option. He's never been the top 10 option for a season long that we've kind of, I think, for right or wrong, we've always kind of assumed that he should be, or kind of felt like he should be. They've had some options down there for him to throw to, but I mean, things haven't worked out for the Raiders. Los Angeles, Oakland, Las Vegas, wherever they've been, they've been real hit or miss down there. And I mean, especially with Derek Carr, with Henry Ruggs and the Antonio Brown fiasco that never really worked out and things like that. But regardless, he's just never really had that top fantasy season. But he's a solid quarterback. I think that he offers more than Dalton did to them last year. Dalton was steady for them. He was okay. They won some games with him. Certainly saw more. We've seen more out of him than we've seen consistently out of Jameis Winston. Now, Jameis Winston has all the athletic talent in the world. I think Sean Payton leaving the Saints really was a step back for Jameis Winston. Now, speaking of Jameis Winston, they did give him, it looks like it's kind of an ultimatum or whatever, like a reworked deal saying, hey, Jameis, we'd like to keep you around, but if you want to stick around, we've got to rework your deal. They've basically given him until Wednesday to, make that decision for himself and whether they're going to keep him or not, and whether it's going to be on this reworked deal. Regardless, I mean, like I said last week, I think Jameis Winston is a rosterable dynasty quarterback. Obviously, I think that Derek Carr is a good ad. If he was available out there, if you want to make a trade for, especially in a 2-quarterback league, I think Derek Carr will be a nice option this year. Like we said, he's got Olave. We'll see what happens with Michael Thomas, but I like Derek Carr this year, but I don't like him as anything more than what he's been, which is a good middle of the pack kind of fallback option. Your quarterback 2 in a 2-quarterback system. Your backup fine to fill in on a weekly basis if you need for your bye week, for your regular starter, or if somebody goes down with injury, okay, you can pick him up, and just like in real life, he's probably not going to kill you. But when all's said and done, I mean, Derek Carr is Derek Carr. If you've had him before, you know what you have in him, and you know what you're going to have in him. So there's my take on that. The Jameis Winston thing, again, he's rosterable, if only because he's going to be a capable backup. He started before. That's not going to be too big for him. And the guy's got all the ability in the world to chuck the football all over the field. I mean, we've seen it before, the good and the bad, but rosterable guy. Elsewhere on the quarterback front, Geno Smith signs an extension with Seattle. I think this is one of the feel-good stories of the entire league over the last several years. If you haven't been paying attention here, Geno Smith, like he said, everybody wrote me off, but I ain't right back yet. Everybody, myself included, had written him off, had passed him by and thought, hey, you know what? Geno's days are done in the NFL as a starter, as a viable option. He was a backup. He'd been a backup. It didn't look like it was going to be anything more than that. Well, then the Russell Wilson trade happens, and Drew Lock comes back. And again, Drew Lock was somebody, myself, again, included. I'll raise my hand and admit to that. I think that the thought last year was that, okay, yeah, Geno might start the year, but eventually they'll give it to Drew Lock. He's younger. They want to see what they have for the future and move on with him. And then Geno never really let go of the job. He just kept playing. He just kept playing at a high enough level that you couldn't justify taking him out. And, really looked like something different than we had ever seen from Geno at the pro level before. Even his couple of year run in New York as a starter for the Jets, we never saw Geno be as consistent as he was last year. And he really seemed like he took that job by the horns. He was a leader for that team and really kind of took the question out of it for them. Now, obviously, I mean, he's not young. He's in his 30s. But, you know, locking him up lets them concentrate elsewhere. And this deal that they gave him, essentially it's 3 years, $75 million deal. Now it can raise to 105 with incentives. Only 40 million of that is guaranteed. So they're not locked into him like long-term here. They can still use him as that bridge starter. It just looks like that bridge is not going to be crossing to Drew Lock anytime soon. It looks like it's going to be crossing to some future, as of yet not on the roster, Seahawk quarterback option. There is no guarantee that they don't take a quarterback in the first round this year. Remember, they have that pick from Denver that they got in the Russell Wilson trade, so they have the ability to draft a quarterback early if they want and still get a player at a different position of need down the line. And if they can afford to take a guy, let him sit behind Geno, let him learn from Geno, and have that bridge, like we said, that bridge to the future, while still having the stability here from Geno Smith. Geno Smith getting $40 million guaranteed. Good for you, dude. He'll make more over the course of this guaranteed 2/3 year contract than he has in his NFL career to date. Only made, I think, something like $3.25, less than $4 million last year. This is a giant step up for him. And again, I think feel good story. Fantasy wise, hey, he was a top 10 quarterback last year. If they can get the same kind of production out of that offense this year, we saw him support DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in that offense. We saw Noah Fant become a usable tight end option up there in Seattle once they finally settled on using Noah Fant and not using the other 13 tight ends that they had on the roster. And Kenneth Walker obviously is a good option out of the backfield there. We'll see what happens with Penny, if Penny can come back healthy at the running back position. But there are options there, and if they can just get similar production, he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback last season, and he was a consistent option. So I expect more of the same. If you've got him in Dynasty, you might be able to, depending on where your roster's at, you may be able to move him right now while his name's in the news. Like we said, he's not necessarily a long-term option. He's more of a short-term option. You might be able to talk somebody into getting you an asset back for that, whether it's a draft asset or younger player at some other position in a 2-quarterback set. Hey, like I said, you've got that bargaining chip of this was a top 10 quarterback last season and can be a top 10 quarterback for you next season and possibly the year after. All he has to do is, perform. And it wasn't like Geno Smith was doing unheard of things last year. He was just doing unheard of things for Geno Smith. We just hadn't seen him do that. Now, the Seahawks were willing to bet on him. They were willing to take that shot. As Pete Carroll said, Geno was willing to take that shot on himself. This contract is a lot better if Geno can perform up to the levels that, apparently he thinks he can and the Seahawks think he can, because it's in the contract for him. He can go out and get himself, this can be a 9-figure deal by the time it's all said and done if Geno performs up to it. So, good stuff there. Again, like I said, I don't mind Geno next year as a option that you could probably wait on in drafts from a redraft standpoint. Dynasty wise, again, you're fine. You've got a quarterback. He was a top 10 option last year. You might be able to snag, a nice option, a nice asset for him if you try to move him this offseason, especially like right now while the name's hot. And maybe even before the draft, if your league is open for business now before the draft, depending on what they do going forward, if they sit at, I believe it's number 5, sitting that high up, if they snag one of those top quarterback options, Don't know that you'll see Geno make year 3 of this deal. So again, it's always you're trying to build Belichick, everybody. When you're talking about a dynasty format, you're looking to move a guy 1 year early rather than 1 year too late. Right now, name in the news, coming off a great year, career year, might not be a better time to move Geno if you're so inclined to do that. Daniel Jones in New York, as we crack our first one of the day here. Daniel Jones signs a 4-year, $160 million contract with the Giants after they refused last year to pick up his 5th-year option. He came out under Brian Daboll, had his best year of his career so far, efficiency-wise. Didn't necessarily have the best counting numbers, but efficiency-wise, he made big steps forward last year. And I've seen some debate on Daniel Jones isn't worth that. Or listen, look at the improvement he's made year over year in terms of his efficiency. Now give him somebody to throw the damn ball to. Who has he's been throwing to dudes like me and my neighbors for the past 4 years. Who has he had? Kenny Golladay? Kenny Golladay hasn't done anything since 2019, since Detroit. He got on the plane in Detroit and he left all his receiver skills behind him, his health, and apparently any sort of positive attitude. I'm not a Kenny Golladay fan. If you haven't caught on, if you've been listening to the show, you may have picked up on that in past episodes. But who has he really had to throw the ball to? Evan Ingram was not Jacksonville Evan Ingram when he was in New York. No one else can seem to stay healthy. Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, obviously Wan'Dale Robinson and Kenny Golladay haven't been able to stay healthy. And they traded Kadarius Toney. Great talent. He couldn't stay healthy when he was in New York. They just have had no one to throw the ball to. Even Saquon Barkley hasn't been healthy enough over the course of Daniel Jones' tenure there to take some of the pressure off of him. Give the guy some healthy weapons. Give him a healthy year of Saquon Barkley like we saw last year. Give him somebody to throw to. Crime's Richie James comes in and he's your top option. Let the guy have somebody to throw to. Sign somebody this year, and we'll talk about it in a little bit here, but apparently they're interested in an Odell reunion. Get the guy somebody to throw to. I think he can be a very good, especially fantasy quarterback. I think you can win with him. He led them to the playoffs this year, won them a playoff game this year. He did everything he had to do this year to earn this contract, I think. And you can debate that all you want, but again, Daboll, I think, is good for him. Look what Daboll was able to do in Buffalo. Daboll is a good coach for a young quarterback. And for bringing a guy along, he has increased the efficiency with the quarterbacks that he's worked with, the young quarterbacks he's worked with in his career. I think that he has brought a new attitude to that Giants locker room that has been needed. And he was good for Daniel Jones. Give that guy somebody to throw to now. Watch him take off. Fantasy-wise, we know Daniel Jones has a great rushing floor. I've been beating the drum for Daniel Jones for a year and a half now. I think that he's one of the best runners in the entire league from the quarterback position. Again, getting better as a passer. He's maturing and developing as a passer. Get the guy some weapons. He's worth the 4 years, $160 million. 82 of it, a little bit over half of it guaranteed. So again, not necessarily a full 4-year contract, but this is a good commitment. It allows them to now focus elsewhere. It allowed them to use the franchise tag to keep Saquon Barkley now. And you can debate the merits of that all you want. We'll talk about Saquon in a little bit here, but running back's franchise tag is a lot cheaper than a quarterback franchise tag. This team now has given themselves some options going forward to be able to add to that team and continue to build on the maybe not quite unexpected success from last year, but I think, bigger success last year than anybody was necessarily thinking they would have. Daniel Jones, again, 4 years, $160 million. I love it. I like him as a top 10 option next year, fantasy-wise, because of that rushing floor. Let's see what they do in the draft here. I've seen them linked to a couple of guys. I saw them linked to Zay Flowers at one point in the draft. I don't know if I necessarily I'm crazy about that, but there are some receivers available. and there should be somebody around when they pick if they want to go that route. I like Daniel Jones as a top 10 type option, top 10 possibility. And if they get him anybody to throw to and he makes any kind of progression in the same vein as what he has made as a passer the last several years, he could surprise a lot of people next year. Elsewhere in the quarterback front, as we take a sip here, Miami, the Dolphins, speaking of fifth-year options, we just saw the Giants take that gamble, not picking up their guy's option and then bringing him back, which is kind of a rarity. Miami decides to pick up Tua Tagovailoa's fifth-year option. Now, Tua Tagovailoa, when they had him healthy last year, they were a much different team. He was a much different quarterback. He was a great quarterback. Obviously, the concussion problems last season, the injury problems, the missed time, there's the specter hanging over his head right now of, is he concussion prone? How much are they going to be able to get from him? Everything that we've seen, what we have right now in front of us from an information standpoint says that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be their quarterback this season, and he should be just as good to go as anybody else is. It means they're paying him they're locked in now to paying him through 2024. It'll be a $23.2 million salary in 2024. Reasonable for a quarterback, especially if they get the kind of play out of him and if he can stay healthy. And I realize that's a big if after last season, but if they can get the same kind of play out of him that they got last season, $23 million is not bad at all for that. Again, we've brought it up before. We've talked about it before that teams trying to make a push with a quarterback on his rookie deal. While he's affordable, strike while that iron's hot, surround him with guys and see if you can make a run. Now they did that. They've Tyreek Hill, they signed, bringing in their new coach, McDaniels, and bringing in Raheem Mostert and bringing in Jeff Wilson and trying to surround him with some talent there. I don't know any more than anybody else does about his health and about how he'll handle the rigors of being a quarterback in the NFL the next couple seasons. If the guy can stay healthy, I know he was dynamic this year. They were a dynamic offense. He's still got Tyreek Hill, who is apparently still a sprint champion. If you saw his race from yesterday, he still has a fun core to throw to. He still has McDaniel as a coach, and he still has the innate ability that he's had the whole time. Now, again, can he stay healthy? We'll see. Fantasy-wise, I mean, he was a good option last year when he was healthy. If you've got him in Dynasty, he's a hold for me in Dynasty. I don't know that I'll be targeting him redraft-wise coming into next season. But hey, you can't do a whole lot better than the weapons he has to throw to. Mike Gesicki being gone at tight end aside, they never threw him anyway. They never used Mike Gesicki. They've got to shake out their running back situation. They've got to figure some of that out. But again, still has the receiver core. So I still like Tua going forward. Like I said, he's a hold in Dynasty for me. I'm not looking to move him. I'm not looking to acquire him in Dynasty yet necessarily. Fifth-year options, quarterback-wise from that same draft class, we're still waiting to hear from the Bengals and the Chargers, but I think anybody that's been watching any kind of football or has any kind of common sense knows that the Bengals are going to pick up Burrow's option. The Chargers are going to pick up Herbert's option. Then the only other option coming out of that class right now is Green Bay and decided on Jordan Love. And again, we're waiting to hear on Jordan Love's account whether or not he's going to be the starter this year and whether they're going to have an opportunity to know what they have in him on that front. The Jets flew a contingent out to California apparently this past week to meet with Aaron Rodgers. By all accounts, the meeting went very well. They came out of it confident, according to several reports, confident that they could swing a deal for Aaron Rodgers. Then we had Mark Murphy, Packers president, come out, was at the Wisconsin girls basketball high school state tournament in Green Bay gave a interview to a reporter there, basically made some comments along the line of, "Oh, sure, yeah, Rodgers could still be our quarterback, I guess, if our top option doesn't work out," something along those lines. Just made it sound like, okay, well, our preference isn't necessarily to have Aaron back. Our preference would be, yeah, let's swing this trade and move on. Interesting. It comes out this morning. Then Rodgers made some comments to Brandon Marshall on I Am Athlete. They were at a charity event, some kind of charity sports event. And Rodgers made some comments to Brandon Marshall along the lines of, won't be long now till we hear a decision, and then made some more kind of half cryptic comments. Of course, it's Aaron Rodgers. What else would we get? Half cryptic comments about how, Brandon Marshall had made a comment about, well, I think I'm an all-time Jet. Brandon Marshall played, if you remember, possibly, he played for the Jets for 2 years. He said, I think I'm an all-time Jet. You could be an all-time Jet too. And Rodgers made some kind of comment back to him about it's hard to be an all-time player on a team with history, only playing for him for 1 year. Does that mean he's planning on being there for 1 year, or he only thinks he'd be there for a year? Is he already reading the tea leaves and thinking that it'd be a 1 year stopover like his mentor Brett Favre had? Who knows? Until we hear anything from Rodgers, I think it looks like if Rodgers says the word, they'll make the trade. Report came out via, I believe it was Tom Pelissero said that there have been no official talks or no trade parameters hashed out between the Jets and the Packers yet. Everybody's just waiting to hear, hey, Aaron, are you coming back for one? Are you coming back to Green Bay for two? Or do you want to go to New York 3? As soon as we hear anything on that, expect things to move quickly. It's looking more and more likely that Aaron Rodgers will be a Jet next year. And it's looking more and more likely that Jordan Love will be the Packers quarterback moving forward here. But we'll see. Either way, they haven't picked up Jordan Love's fifth-year option yet. We're still waiting to see on that. They've got until, I think, May of this year to do it. And we'll see what happens with Rodgers. All right, let's listen to our friends over at RexMD. We'll listen to our spot on that. We come back on the other side. We'll move on to some other positions. I had some interesting news this week at the running back, wide receiver position. And then, like we said, let's get into some free agent talk and figure out where some of these people are going to go.
Fellas, do you sometimes need a little help in the bedroom? Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and our sponsors at RexMD are here to help you make this the best night of your life. Erectile dysfunction is a common medical issue that over 30 million men in the U.S. tackle every day. We've all had those nights where we get too nervous and just need a little help. The doctors at RexMD will evaluate you online, no office visit needed, and ship medication directly to your door before the big day. With RexMD, they're here to help and provide you with real FDA-approved medications at the best price. Act now to take advantage of their Valentine's Day deal by heading to RexMD.com/bellyup. Our exclusive deal will save you up to 90% off, where you'll pay as low as $2 per dose on generic Viagra instead of $90+ on Viagra. That's RexMD/bellyup for 90% off. Your partner will thank you.
Your partner will thank you. Like we said, get over there, use your promo code BELLYUP, get yourself some help. May not make tonight the best night ever. You might have to wait a few days for the mail to deliver, but it'll definitely help you out going forward. All right, moving on now. Like we said, a lot of movement in the NFL this week. We're ramping up to the free agency period, really getting started. We've had a few free agents sign already because they were released outright by their teams. Anybody whose contract just expired, that legal tampering, whatever the hell that means, if it's legal, it's not tampering. But the legal tampering period is what they call it. That opens up tomorrow afternoon. So we should start hearing guys who have agreed to deals as soon as tomorrow afternoon. We'll start hearing the parameters of deals in place and starting to hear who's going where. Wednesday then is the official start of the new league calendar year. And that's when those deals can then be made official. You'll see lots of official tweets coming out from Ian Rappaport and Field Yates will be on. The guys from all over the place will have thoughts on that. I'll be giving my thoughts on Twitter as signings are made and we start to get a clearer picture of who's going to be where, but then also what teams still have needs as we then head in and ramp up to the draft. Mentioned it earlier, Saquon Barkley gets the franchise tag from the New York Giants. Now, Saquon finally had a healthy year last year. Finally, was able to sort of get back to that same level of play that we saw from him his that phenomenal first year in the league, his rookie season. They didn't use him quite as much in the pass game as they had that year, but he still had 76 targets last year, caught 57 balls, which was a nice total. They gave him almost 300 carries. He had over 300 touches on the year, 295 carries last year, but again, finally got that other healthy year out of Saquon that we hadn't seen in the last couple of years. If you took him high, you were rewarded for that, as opposed to the last several years where you took him high, as I did twice, and got burned. But signing Daniel Jones to that deal meant that they could franchise tag Saquon. Now we've heard all kinds of talk. We talked about it on the show. You've heard it elsewhere about the devaluation of the running back position in the NFL, and not necessarily devaluation in terms of from an important standpoint of the position, but a devaluation in terms of the importance of an individual player and what we're willing to pay, what teams are willing to pay these guys. It's not like when I was a kid, and I'm an old man, but when I was coming up, when I was a young man, starting out in the fantasy world here, running back was the be all end all, and it was the be all end all of offense too. And obviously now it isn't just the last 20 years; it's the last 40 years. The league has been progressing towards a much more pass happy format. All the rule changes are meant to increase the passing game and protect quarterbacks and free up wide receivers and give us the explosive offense that the league assumes that everybody wants to watch. Correlating with that has been the devaluation of the running back position. Running backs have short shelf lives. We know that. We know they start to decline around age 27, 28. By age 30, they're basically old men. And they've become somewhat interchangeable just from a scheming standpoint in the NFL. Now, if you've got that guy, if you've got Derrick Henry, if you've got a healthy Saquon Barkley, obviously those guys are massive, massive weapons. But I mean, we've also seen systems that can just plug a guy in and keep marching, keep moving forward. Do you want to pay a guy, a top 5 type salary at that position if you can help it? Well, obviously the Giants felt that Saquon was worth that. And I would argue that, we just talked about it. Who the hell else are they going to give that kind of money to? They don't have any receivers that really stand out and make you say, yeah, pay that man. We don't know about Wan'Dale Robinson, but Wan'Dale Robinson is a slot receiver for them and is smaller option coming off an injury. Don't know when he'll be available. I don't think anybody's rushing to give Sterling Shepard or Darius Slayton, even as consistent as Darius Slayton was last year for them, and as good as Sterling Shepard was looking before the injury. I don't think anybody's rushing to pay either one of those guys. Talked about Richie James. There's just nobody on that roster right now that you really want to pay other than that. Now, yeah, they can free up that money elsewhere, but Saquon is a good weapon, and he can be a weapon in the pass game too. They've used him that way before. They used him that way to some extent last year. So I like that move. I like Saquon again as a top 10 option next year, a top 5 type option at running back. That's locked in. Elsewhere, Odell Beckham. Speaking of the Giants, Odell Beckham had a workout this week down in Arizona, trying to show people that he's ready to go. Obviously missed all of last year, decided to sit out the entire year rather than signing with anybody. Took the whole year to get healthy and worked out according to reports that we've seen. Said he looked explosive. He looked good. They said he looked muscular. Someone had a quote that he looked somewhere like between a cross between Saquon Barkley and, say, Deebo Samuel. That would be something kind of new for Odell, I think, if he's looking that thick. But anywhere from 12 to 14 teams are down there. Reports the 49ers, the Bills, the Browns interested in reunion. Hey, Baker's not around. He might be willing. That'd be interesting. Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Odell, the way that David Njoku played last season. I mean, a reunion there could be fun now if Odell was willing to do it. Arizona obviously was in their backyard. You'd think the Cardinals would send somebody. The Chiefs, again, talk about the rich getting richer. Odell on that team. The Giants, as we said, the Jets had reps there. The Panthers, who can use all the help they can get on offense right now. The Patriots, the Rams, always looking for a reunion with him. That's been in the works since he got injured and since he left. Baltimore, who could always use some help there. Minnesota, again, an intriguing possibility, especially with the release of Adam Thielen. KJ Osborne, is he a number 2? Is he not? Across from Justin Jefferson, are you going to not double Justin Jefferson? Okay, well, fine. But that means you're going to single cover Odell Beckham, who still, according to this, if you've seen any of the clips or anything from his workout earlier this week, can still make the one-handed crazy ass grabs. Who are you going to cover? TJ Hawkinson is there too. Remember, that's an interesting possibility as well. So Odell working out. We'll see where he goes. The Broncos wide receivers. There's been, some reports that teams have been contacting the Broncos, asking about Jerry Jeudy, asking about Courtland Sutton. Are either of them available? So far, the Broncos have said, no, we're not shopping them. We're not interested in that. Now, I heard other reports that they were talking about this week that said that they may be interested in possibly doing that. That Tim Patrick, remember, he missed all last season with the knee injury. You might remember someone on this show was high on Tim Patrick coming into last season. He and Courtland Sutton both profiled as the type of receiver that Russell Wilson likes to work with. Bigger, taller body and throw it downfield type. I was psyched up for Tim Patrick last season. Then he blew the knee out, shot that all to hell. But there's some thought, okay, hey, is Tim Patrick the guy that they'll want to keep and move on from Sutton? They could probably get something for Sutton. He's still young enough. You could still move him. Obviously, Judy's young. Jeudy brings something a little different to the table than Sutton and Patrick do, though. And he looked like he was starting to figure it out last year. He looked like, when he was finally healthy, he looked like he was starting to be that receiver they were hoping they got when they drafted him. So keep an eye on that. They've got kind of they've got a fun, deepish receiver core there. They might be able to work something out, especially since they need a running back. No telling if Javonte Williams is going to be available for the beginning of the season. He may be more hurt than they've let on. Was one of the, I think it was Jeff Mans talking about it on Elite Sports on Sirius XM Radio this past week. Javonte Williams may be a little more hurt than they're letting on. They may be a little leery of that situation. They're going to keep Latavius Murray, who obviously has some history with Sean Payton there. We've seen Latavius Murray be a usable fantasy back in a Sean Payton system. Now, Latavius Murray is older than you and me, but if he's comfortable in that system, if they're willing to give him the ball, he could still score points. He did last year. But they may need to bridge between now and when Javonte Williams can get himself healthy with that leg injury, that knee injury. They did just cut Chase, or they're going to cut Chase Edmonds. Edmonds, listen, he was a throw-in in the Bradley Chubb trade. He never really did a whole lot for them anyway last season. This might be the end. You heard it here first if it happens. Chase Edmonds, I don't know how usable he'll be as a running back in fantasy going forward, dynasty or otherwise. There's a lot of guys out there on the free agent market. We just talked about the running back position, how it's interchangeable. And there are a lot of guys, and we'll talk about them here in a little bit. a lot of names out there right now. And there are a lot of names, almost every single one of them I would rather have on my team right now. Whether I'm an actual GM or a fantasy GM, there's a lot of those guys I'd rather have before Chase Edmonds. We may have seen the end of him as a usable fantasy piece or as a consistently usable fantasy piece. But the running back situation in Denver, one to look out for. They may be somebody in on one of these free agent running backs, depending on the health situation there with Javonte Williams. Wide receiver wise, hey, Vikings, talked about them. They released Adam Thielen, longtime franchise stalwart. He's gone. Probably wasn't as bad last season as I think we all feel he was, just because he wasn't as good as we've seen Adam Thielen be in the past. I think he still has something to offer people. I think that he is more of a number 3 receiver at this type, but if you get him on the right team where he can be it's a cliche, but if he can be a veteran mentor to a younger receiver group, you bring him into a young receiver room, they can learn from him. He could be a real nice safety blanket type for a young quarterback just coming into the league. We know we've got several guys who are going to be, drafted here coming up in the next month and a half. And, say a place like Carolina with a young receiver room and no real established receiving leader on that team. And they're going to have a young quarterback here coming up with the number 1 pick. Guy like Adam Thielen would be a real intriguing fit there in Carolina in my opinion. I think that somebody like him that could really help out not just your quarterback, but the rest of the receivers in that room. That would be something I would be really looking into if I were a team like Carolina, who I knew was going to have a young quarterback and who I knew didn't have necessarily a top established option right now at receiver. Houston, same kind of situation. Going to have, in all likelihood, going to have a new and young quarterback. Don't really have an established leader in that receiver room. Yes, they've got Brandon Cooks right now, but I think that it looks like Brandon Cooks is gone for all. If they can do it at all, I think it looks like Brandon Cooks wants to move on. And I think Adam Thielen could be a really nice option in that kind of an offense. Bobby Trees, speaking of the Texans, Robert Woods just signs down there. 2-year deal. Listen, no one's been a bigger Robert Woods fan than me in the last several years. I loved him. He saved my fantasy season in my keeper league a couple years ago. But I think he's not cut out right at this point, post injury, especially. He's not cut out to be that top option on a team that isn't chucking the ball all over the place like LA was. Even if a team is chucking the ball all over the place, I just don't think he's cut out right now anymore to be a top option. He's a solid player. He's going to be good for that team. He'll be good for that receiver room. But that's a team in transition. As a team that we don't know much about how their quarterback situation is going to be. So from a fantasy standpoint, I'm not big on Robert Woods. He's probably still a wide receiver 4 option, maybe with some 3 upside. Which is where I think Adam Thielen would be if he were to sign there as well. The same kind of thing. Not excited about that, but it happened this week. Jamal Williams led the league in rushing touchdowns last season for the Lions. I know the Lions want him back. There's some talk now that the Bills, the Bengals, the Jets may be interested in him. And those are intriguing possibilities. Listen, I loved Jamal Williams as a Packer. I miss him. I like A.J. Dillon and I like Aaron Jones, but I miss Jamal Williams. He was great. He was fun personality. One of those guys that if he's on your team, he's got a real fun personality. If he's not on your team, it can be really annoying. And if you saw anything from Hard Knocks last year with when they were with the Lions, you know what I'm talking about. But these are 3 teams that are intriguing in terms of Jamal Williams, what he brings to the table, the skill set, and the situation that we're talking about there. You're looking at 3 teams that seem to employ or have employed that rushing down quarterback, that like goal line and early down option, and then a pass catching back. We've seen it in Cincinnati. Joe Mixon has been an early down back, but not necessarily one who's been all that successful from a yards per carry standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint. It's just they give him the ball enough that, he scores points, fantasy-wise especially. Yards per carry don't mean a ton to us in fantasy in terms of our bottom line at the end, but they're a good indicator of the success a guy's having, and you can use them to project a little bit. Mixon has had some interesting legal situations happen this offseason. Now, he's not being charged with any of them from what we've learned, but he's costing you a lot of money at that running back position. The talk for Jamal Williams is he might get around a $4 million a year deal. That's a lot cheaper than what you're going to be paying for Joe Mixon. You get out from under Mixon, you get out from underneath the headache of Joe Mixon from a social standpoint. And I mean, you can't do a whole lot worse than his efficiency numbers the last couple of years. He averaged less than 3 yards a carry, I believe, last year. Jamal Williams as a short down back, we saw him do it this year. We've seen him do it in the past. We've seen Jamal Williams be the guy, first, second, and third down. But especially, on a team that has Samaje Perine, Perine has shown he can be a pass catching back. Pairing the two of them up, intriguing thought. Buffalo, James Cook, young, looks like they want to use him more as a pass catching back than as a traditional 3 down or every down back. Devin Singletary's on the market. Devin Singletary, who are you going to pay more, Devin Singletary or Jamal Williams? Singletary probably gets a little bit more, not much, but I'm just saying it's a possibility there, pairing Williams up with Cook. And, then again, the Jets. Hopefully Breece Hall comes back and looks like the Breece Hall we got before the injury. He's hoping to be back by the beginning of the year, but that's not a given. They've got Michael Carter there, who they've deployed in that capacity before, and who is used to. Remember, Michael Carter, speaking of Javonte Williams, Michael Carter and Javonte Williams split, carries and split work in North Carolina in college. Jamal Williams comes in there, maybe can, especially as a cheaper 1 year option, allows you to work Breece Hall in gradually from that injury. You don't have to rely on him. He doesn't have to be that bell cow guy. You still have Michael Carter from last year. That's an intriguing possibility to me as well. Of course, there's the secondary soap opera storyline of, a reunion with Aaron Rodgers possibly, but intriguing thoughts there. And then, the other fun news we'll get to here, and this will transition us into the draft after our second commercial break here. But DJ Moore goes to Chicago as part of the big package that the Panthers send to the Bears for the number 1 overall pick. I mentioned earlier, it's the first time the top overall pick's been traded before April, and Chicago gets they drop down to 1-9. They also pick up pick number 61 in this draft, so they pick up a second rounder there. They have next year's Carolina first round pick, which, if Carolina is as good as we expect them to be, could find them right back up here at the top of the damn draft again. And they pick up Carolina's 2025 second round pick. A nice haul for them, period, regardless of the DJ Moore add-in. But the talk was that the scuttlebutt that's been going around is that if DJ Moore wasn't included, Chicago really wanted him. They really wanted that young receiver. They wanted to try and get that true number 1 type guy for Justin Fields. They are committing to building around Justin Fields, not resetting the time clock on that rookie contract like we've talked about before, like I mentioned earlier in the show. They are going to build around him, and they wanted that number 1 back. If they hadn't included DJ Moore in the deal, they probably were asking for another high pick. Next year's second, or the 25 first as well, or along those lines. Regardless, they get DJ Moore. So they finally get now a guy that we think can be a number 1 type option for Justin Fields. Now you move Darnell Mooney from having to be the number 1 down to a number 2, which is, I think, what he's probably more suited for in this league anyway. If Chase Claypool can actually play like Chase Claypool is capable of playing. Didn't work out great for him last year, but let's give the benefit of the doubt to the number 3 receiver on the Bears now. This could be a fun receiving core. Cole Kmet. All these guys are young. They're all 24 and under, I believe. They all have a chance now to grow with Justin Fields. that could be a fun offense here coming up in the next year or two, especially if they can shore up that offensive line. Now, at 1-9, they'll have an opportunity to do that. Do they want to try and get another weapon? Do they want to go defense? Because that defense needs it, but their offensive line needs it as well. If they could shore up and use that pick maybe on an offensive lineman, really commit to this Justin Fields thing, could be a fun offense. If not an effective one from a real life standpoint in terms of wins, remember they only won. There's a reason they were the number one pick this year. From a fantasy standpoint, we know Justin Fields is a top fantasy option type quarterback because of that rushing floor. If we can add any kind of passing into that mix as well, DJ Moore, probably a bit of a downgrade for him in terms of his fantasy outlook, at least initially. He was a number 2-ish receiver fantasy wise, but look who he hasn't had anybody thrown to him to this point. That's not necessarily changing next year. So what's different about DJ Moore? I'm not going to ignore DJ Moore in fantasy drafts just because he's on the Bears now. I don't think his situation has necessarily gotten any worse by going to the Bears. Now, at least the Bears know who their quarterback is going to be. That's something the Panthers haven't been able to say for several years. They haven't been able to say that week to week, let alone for the season. All right. So DJ Moore, that's a nice move for Chicago. It's a nice pickup. Ryan Poles, hey, everybody north of Chicago in the NFC North is not real happy that it looks like they may have actually found a GM that knows what the hell he's doing in Chicago. That's a team that looks to be on the rise. Maybe not like Detroit necessarily, but Chicago, if they're putting the pieces together, which is something they haven't necessarily been able to say for quite a while now. All right, let's get to our second commercial break here. We come back on the other side. Let's talk about some of the top free agent options since we're going to hear some free agency. We're going to see it happening starting tomorrow. Let's hear about some of that. But first, let's listen to our good friends over here at Manscaped.
We have breaking news. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. They are once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the technology behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit allows you to shape your signature beard look. Now you can finally use Manscaped products to make your drapes match your carpet by going to manscaped.com and using the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY for 20% off and free shipping. It's time to tame your mane. No one likes a weird beard, so say goodbye to all your stubble and trouble with Manscaped Pro Beard Kit. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This thing is a juggernaut of fixing faces. First off, this cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard, so no more messy drawers full of extra add-ons. That's right, face grooming doesn't need to be hard. Get 20 different beard lengths in just one guard. Plus, it's waterproof, so you can shave in the shower to avoid all that hair in the sink. The titanium-coated T-blade is tough on hair but smooth on your face, leading to single-stroke efficiency that brings satisfaction one stroke at a time. So make sure you get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com by using the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. Once again, that's 20% off and free shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY at manscaped.com.
Yes, we raise our glass to the fine folks over there at Manscaped. Like we said, hey, you got to keep them separated. Don't be using the same trimmer you're using up top down below. Now you don't have to with Manscaped. You can have it all. I've been mentioning I'm trying to grow mine out. I've been waiting on it because I don't grow as quick as some other guys do. But, hey, the beard balm, you can use that. Keep those, shape that thing up. Keep all the flyaways tamed. The beard shampoo is real nice. It's not harsh. Some guys, hey, if you've got a face like a cowboy boot, fine. Use the same shampoo you use on your head. Use the bar soap on your whatever. Great. That ain't for me. You want a beard wash that's not going to be as harsh on your face as that other stuff is. This has got it going on for you. Beard oil comes in a neat little spritzer. Anybody who's used beard oil, if you got to use the dropper, can get all over the place. Nice little spritzer, keeps it all where you want it. put that in your beard, keeps it nice, soft, helps moisturize the skin underneath. Hey, your beard produces oils, but the longer your beard gets, the harder it is for your body to keep up moisturizing your entire beard and moisturizing, producing enough oil essentially to keep your face, moisturized and keep it soft. Beard oil, applying some helps with that. So get on over there to Manscaped, use that promo code for Belly Up and get yourself some of that stuff. I'm loving it. I'm having a great time, being able to see what they've got to offer up top as well as down below. All right, moving on now. Yeah, free agency, like we said, free agency coming up this week. Just real quick, I want to hit on some of these top guys here, and we'll kind of go up or down. Are we excited or not? We'll start at quarterback. Talked about quarterbacks last week, but it is not, especially now that we've had some movement, not a good quarterback crop this year, guys. There is nobody who's going to be looking to fill a long-term starter from this quarterback free agency class, and you shouldn't be necessarily all that excited about it either from a fantasy standpoint. Your top option out there probably from a free agent standpoint is Jimmy Garoppolo right now. Jimmy G was fine last season. He's been a fine quarterback in his career. I like Jimmy G. I'm not excited about him wherever he's going to sign right now. What's a situation where Jimmy G signs with a team that you're like psyched up about? Houston? We've heard some rumblings of him going to the Texans, especially with DeMeco Ryans coming from San Francisco, bringing some of the San Francisco assistant coaches with him. Does that excite you, fantasy-wise? Jimmy G in Houston? Las Vegas? Does that excite you? No. New York, if he signs with the Jets, that means they lost out on Aaron Rodgers. And it also means that you're looking at another year of, is Zach Wilson going to, of uncertainty at that position. If they sign Jimmy G, do they bring Mike White back? I don't think so. Where's Jimmy G going to sign right now that you're excited about him fantasy-wise? That you're like, oh, hell yeah, I got to get me some of that. Nowhere. And he's the top option probably out there on the market. Jacoby Brissett. I love Brissett as a backup. I think he deserves a lot of credit and a lot of respect for what he did, not just last year in Cleveland, for what he did in Indianapolis, taking over in the wake of the whole Andrew Luck early retirement decision. Jacoby Brissett has been a professional quarterback. I have a lot of respect for Jacoby Brissett, the way he's handled himself, drafted and playing in New England, the trade to the Colts and what he did there. And then again, the way he handled the entire situation last year, knowing full damned well he was not the guy in Cleveland, but still giving it everything he had, saying all the right things. But he's not an option that excites me. He's a backup quarterback, and he's probably the number 2 option on the market. Andy Dalton, again, my age. Carson Wentz. I think we've seen enough Carson Wentz by now that no one is excited if he comes to your team. He may be brought in somewhere to compete. Again, would it be a shock if somebody like Houston signed him for a bridge term? If whoever they draft this year, we assume it's going to be a quarterback early. Would it be a biggest shock? Wouldn't it be a Houston thing to do, to kind of sign Carson Wentz as a bridge option and then have him completely fall on his can again? Or worse yet, he looks like he maybe has something for the first half of the season and everybody gets all excited and then Carson Wentz is out again. Sam Darnold, again, we don't even have to mention that. Taylor Heineke, Mike White, the aforementioned. I'll tell you, honestly, one of the names that intrigues me the most, and I don't necessarily say I'm excited about it, but one of the names that interests me the most, the last guy we'll talk about quarterback-wise, Baker Mayfield. Again, I think Baker played himself into a career extension last season with what he did in Los Angeles. He showed that he can be a legitimate quarterback in this league. If you put him in the right situation, you give him the right coaching, you give him the right weapons, Baker Mayfield can be a middle of the road, legitimate starting quarterback in this league. He's not going to be the number one overall pick type that Cleveland was hoping for and everybody else was hoping for, but he can be a legitimate quarterback in this league. He's not he's not a sexy option, but Baker Mayfield could, in the right situation, could surprise. I don't think he wants to go somewhere as a backup. I think he's going to have to go somewhere as a backup, but I think he's going to want to pick an opportunity to be the guy. Pick a place where maybe it's an older starter where he maybe can either phase that guy out or take over for him after in the short term, more rather than the long term, or go somewhere like a Houston where they don't have an established guy where Davis Mills is not anybody's idea of an established guy. We keep bringing up Houston because they need a quarterback. Teams need a quarterback. You're going to talk about quarterbacks. Baker interests me. He intrigues me just from a standpoint of I'm interested to see where he'll go and how it'll work out. Running backs, we talked about Jamal Williams. There are a ton of options out there right now, and that's not good from the standpoint of if you are a free agent running back. It's great if you're a team that needs one, but do you really want to give any of these guys a big contract knowing that it's a replaceable position? Jamal Williams, Miles Sanders, guys that, these are all guys that we've seen be not just decent starters in the NFL, but usable fantasy pieces. Very usable. Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Devin Singletary. Sanders and Montgomery are kind of, dual threat-y. Kareem Hunt, big-time dual threat-y. Damian Harris, Deontay Foreman. I still think Deontay Foreman probably should go back to Carolina. They should re-sign him. I don't know that I'm sold on Chuba Hubbard as the answer at running back for them. I think Chuba Hubbard is probably what they used him as last year. He's more of a third down guy, I think. We'll say, and Deontay Foreman's been good in the last couple of years as a guy, middle of the road guy, but usable. But yeah, a lot of names out there on the running back market. It's a deep free agent class. There are some intriguing options in the draft coming up here, headlined by Bijan Robinson. But, there are guys on this list. These guys are going to have jobs next year. Interesting to see where they all shake out, where they go, who goes back home, who doesn't. But a lot of names out there on that free agent running back market. Wide receiver, this is a position that is not as deep. This is a position where the more intriguing names in the wide receiver category are on the trading block. It's the Brandon Cookses. It's DeAndre Hopkins. It's guys like that who are on the trade block that are the more interesting options at receiver. From a free agent, angle, we're looking at Jacoby Myers being possibly the top option out there. Juju Smith-Schuster, who may or may not, be headed back to Kansas City. Allen Lazard, I was big on Allen Lazard last year. I will own that. I don't think I was being a homer in terms of being just a Packer fan. If you looked at his numbers before last season, his numbers per touch and the workload increase that I expected him to see, he looked like he was set to have a monster year. We all know how the pass game worked out last year in Green Bay. It did not until Christian Watson finally grew up. But Lazard is out there on the market and probably too expensive for the Packers to bring back. I don't expect to see him back in Green Bay. DJ Chark is out there. Again, not a guy that excites anybody, but a solid player. He'll give somebody, he'll sign somewhere. He'll be good for 60-some catches next year. And, a solid player, but not anybody's idea of a top flight number one. Darius Slayton, who was very solid and very consistent for the Giants last year, but again, didn't shoot the lights out. Paris Campbell. These are just not names that gets anybody's blood boiling from a fantasy standpoint. They can help guys. They're solid NFL players. Solid NFL players that I wouldn't mind on my team in real life, but I'm not. Juju Smith-Schuster, we've seen be a top 10 guy before. He has to be in the right situation. This is a guy who was with Patrick Mahomes last year and wasn't putting up top receiver numbers. Jacoby Myers again. Yeah. So that's your wide receiver. I'm looking more at the trade market for wide receiver in terms of some big hits to happen. Tight end, Dalton Schultz is out there. Now, Dalton Schultz did not get the franchise tag. Some people were expecting he possibly could. The Cowboys decided to franchise tag Tony Pollard instead. I think that's the right move. Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot, a couple of young guys, rookies last season. You've got young guys at that position. We didn't see a ton out of Ferguson and Hendershot, but I think you saw enough that, like, hey, you can turn that position over to them. Maybe bring in another veteran guy to use as your blocking type, mentor type, tight end. They don't need to be giving Dalton Schultz the money that he probably is looking for, that he might get out there. Mike Gesicki, underused in Miami. But what is he? Is he a tight end? Is he just a big slot receiver that doesn't run as well as 95% of the other receivers in the league? I don't know either. I know that they obviously didn't see enough in him to want to use him much. So is Mike Gesicki running more on? Is he running more on some perception of him that we've kind of all constructed with no real evidence for the construction? I don't know. You tell me. Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst has always been a solid tight end, good player. Again, one of those guys that I would love to see on my team, whether we're talking about the Packers, whether we're talking about the Browns, whether we're talking about me and some other hypothetical team I'd be cheering for. Hayden Hurst is a guy I would love to see as a tight end on my team. I don't know I want him as my top option. Fantasy-wise, any of these guys, depending on where they sign, are just as good as anybody else. Schultz, yeah, he's been a top 5 type guy in the last couple of years, but is he that away from Dallas? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure he's not just a guy. Irv Smith. Irv Smith was so good and had so much potential that the Vikings brought in TJ Hawkinson. And TJ Hawkinson is a good talent. He is a top option at the tight end position and showed it when he got to Minnesota. We had seen flashes and glimpses of it in Detroit. Once he leapfrogged my state and came over to Minnesota, he really showed what kind of top option he could be. That's how awesome Irv Smith is, that they felt like, you know what? No. Let's go out and pay TJ. Let's trade in division for TJ Hawkinson, knowing that we're going to have to pay that man. And they let Irv Smith go. So there's your tight end crop. Weirdly enough, the top names, the biggest names, are at the position that is probably the least important of all of them in terms of, signings and running back. Most of the big names are running back, but how many big situations are we going to see from those guys? Should be interesting. Keep an eye on it this week. Like we said, legal tampering starts tomorrow. Starting tomorrow afternoon, we'll start hearing some things. And we will have it covered for you over at Belly Up Fantasy Sports. I said, check me out, STT Chase FFB on the Twitter machine there. I will be giving my thoughts on all the big signings that start coming out as soon as tomorrow. So check back for that. Check back at bellyupfantasysports.com for my articles as we ramp up here, and not just through free agency, but as we ramp up to the draft. I'll have divisional and team previews coming up on fantasy baseball, a ton of fantasy baseball content over there. So if you're into fantasy baseball, you can read Ian Lemersall, you can read myself, you can read Kevin Wilson has been releasing stuff. Vince Stover's had some great stuff come out. So check that out over there. As always, check out Divots and Pivots podcast for Mr. Mallet Andrew, and articles that he's got coming out as well. Get yourself over there. If you like what you're hearing, what you're seeing, give us a like and a subscribe here on the YouTube and everywhere else that you've seen this podcast. But thanks for joining us. Getting to be an exciting time of year. It's weird. There is no off season in the NFL in terms of excitement. It just keeps coming. We move from games to the intrigue and the hot stove. we move from that into the draft, and by the time the draft is done, hey, it's time to start talking about mini camps and preseason. So until next time, next Sunday, we will see you then. Slán Java, everybody. Have a good one, and let's hope that that you're doing better weather-wise than I'm about to, because I will be snowblowing for about the next hour and a half. Cheers.